Hi, this is Matt. Thanks for joining. This update is going to cover a trip we had from October 25th through November 5th. The board started doing these trips about 5 years ago. We took a 2-year pause during COVID, and they tend to be a combination of visiting the schools, checking in with the teachers, having a board meeting, and just having time to chat about how the program is going and where it's going. Most of this presentation is taken from a Zoom meeting, although I did splice in a little bit of video and other photos from the visit.
So quick background on Fotokids. Over the 30 years, they've served about 2,000 kids, and it focuses mostly on those kids who are really affected by extreme poverty and violence, right? The amount of gang violence in Guatemala is off the charts. And the core to it is really using photography, graphic design, media as a tool to hook the kids and bring them in. And it gives them a way to develop self-expressions, a passion, a reason for being, if you will, in a way to get them off the street and connected to something. And ultimately, that combined with the traditional education gives them a path that allows them to stay in the town where they're living in Guatemala. The jobs are not just in photography, although a lot of them do get jobs that are around photography, design, and video. It gives them really a set of skills that they can go out and be in the workforce and have the confidence to go out and succeed. When I was thinking about the things that I like about Fotokids, I mean, the first thing is the impact that it has. Unlike some things, every little bit that Fotokids does makes a really significant difference on the lives of the students and the families who are with the students. Leverage. Guatemala, a few dollars goes an incredibly long way. A lot of the families we were working with, make maybe $3 or $5 a day, right? So any amount of money that's contributed makes a huge difference. The personal connection. So I've sponsored a number of students over the years, and you get to see how that student's progressing. Fotokids works with kids over about 8 years. Every year they send you a Christmas card and an update, so you've got this really strong personal connection. The other thing is the programs are running for 30 years. So, Nancy started this about 30 plus years ago, and the thing has bobbed and weaved and is still going strong and growing. And the other thing I think is kind of cool is it's super relevant because it relates to the whole immigration story. So I learned so much about Central American migration and how badly these families and people want to stay in their village and not come up to the States and be with their family, with their community, eating their local food. So, this is one of those things that really touches on a much bigger part of the story. So one of the really cool things about the trip was Nancy and Evelyn organized the 30th Anniversary Retrospective. And this included work over the last 30 years from all the kids. And it was, at a beautiful site. This is Nancy at the opening. This is me looking quite wrinkled. But there were 3 or 4 really nice gallery spaces with, work. This is sort of the black and white area. There was color photography. It was beautiful. In the opening, we had a really nice turnout, and it's running from 2 or 3 weeks ago through to the first week of February. So this was at the very, very beginning of it. So I'm going to go through some of the photos, and I picked a random selection of photos from the retrospective. Like all of these were taken by the children over the last 30 years. You've got some of these which are, of the parents, of the families, intense and up close.
This is these photos are all from a book that we did that was published in 1995 or 96. That was published by William Morrow and Company, and it was their children's book division. So the children had written a lot of stories or anecdotes around the pictures, not necessarily their pictures, but around the pictures. They worked with a writer. And I did want to say one thing, and it's kind of an unusual project because, most projects go for large numbers of kids, which is fine. We go with like 5th and 6th graders, and we stay with those same kids all the way through the university. So they'll stay with us 5 years, 10 years. The entire staff has been with us more than 20 years, way more. Some of them 25, some of them, I don't think anybody's been with us 30 years, but but yeah, but so they stay, and then they graduate, and like Matt said, they lots of times go into communications or graphic arts or television, TV cameraman, but then they also go into education, architecture, business administration, anything they want, really, So, and it's just a different way of doing it. And I think we're the only ones doing it that way. So when people say, well, how many kids have you helped? Well, I mean, because it's a long term and we actually teach, the program, it's a long-term investment, and we only take one kid per family so that they can sacrifice that kid. So he or she won't be working, but will then, help support the family once they can get a job. Okay. Sorry.
Cool.
Sorry, man. Yeah.
No, that's great. The thing I love about it is you have shots like this where, the kids are still being kids, but yet the shot on the right is a really beautiful, well thought out shot. So you have this balance of playfulness and, and artistry.
The other thing about that shot with the quetzal is the national bird. So, that's the national symbol that can't live in captivity. So it has a real symbolic meaning as well. Yeah, there's that, but the one on the left, that kid was the assignment was camouflage, and I just couldn't believe that somebody would like go, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll make my own background and I'll put black blobs all over, then I'll put blobs on my shirt and I'll stand there with my finger with the paint on, and it's like, wow. Yeah, some creative thinking.
That's awesome. So this is an interesting one too, right? So this is the recreation. This isn't the actual.
No, this is the actual. This was Rember, who was killed in the dump. The other one, the kidnapping, is the recreation. But this was actually Rember's funeral. He was our first kid. When I first took the kids, they were from 5 to 12 years old. And the oldest was Rember, who was 12. And he's the only one that had been to school. And he'd been to just third grade. But then his parents hadn't sent him after that. But he was great. He really wanted to be a photographer and all this. But when he hit 15, they murdered him in the dump. And so that is that's his funeral, taken by one of the kids. Wow, it was really, really sad. We'd just gotten an invitation to show at the Photographers Gallery in London. And opening shot, which was a Channel 4 Great Britain children's program, had come out and filmed us. They were the same people that did Masterpiece Theater. And they said, well, why don't you come with 3 kids? And they arranged for us to come, and Rember was one of them. And it was like just a month or so before he was supposed to come with me that happened. It was really, really sad. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That was like, that must have been 25 years ago. Yeah.
So this was on a lighter note.
I sent that out, and some woman said, I think you sent the wrong pictures. There's some nude guy there with a bunch of children.
The other thing,
Father, I like that one too.
Yeah, I don't know what this one was, but there were a lot of photos that were taken during COVID where you had to take shots of what was happening inside. So
gestures of love.
Whoever came up with that caption is perfect. Yeah, here are 2 other ones that are a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
But so this is like, for me, this is one of the things that always touches me. It's just, a lot of these kids live in really impoverished, situations, but yet they're still kids. They're still making the most of it. They're finding joy and beauty in what's there. It's the same with you.
Yeah. I remember hearing 2 of them talking one time, and they said, they were talking about poverty, and one turned to the other and said, we don't really know anybody like that, do we?
Yeah.
It's like, they didn't see themselves as poor. They just saw themselves as, that's their neighborhood,
So now I'm going to talk about you, Nancy.
Okay.
Because for me, like of all the people I know, I think Nancy's trajectory is just absolutely inspiring to me. When you started off as a photojournalist, the stuff that you did, and the cool thing with this trip was because it was such a big anniversary, a bunch of Nancy's friends came down to Guatemala. who were all these like badass women who, if you walked in, you saw them having a glass of wine, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's nice. But when you hear their stories of the stuff that they went through and the number of people that shot at them and, the trouble you got yourselves into, it's really, really inspiring. And to see, I pulled this, these are the shots that you shared of, the kids and the involvement with the kids in the war.
Look at that little guy, is the machine gun's almost as big as him, them.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the kids that were hanging around the army. Oh yeah, these were the girls. Yeah.
And then this is, these are the first photos I could find of when you started the program in the dump.
Yeah, those were the first kids. I think we're missing a couple, but yeah, the one in the back and one of the ones in front came. These two are sisters, and I guess you can't see that, but yeah, they came in later. But yeah, that's the dump, and that was Rember, the tallest one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. So this is another shot. I took this a couple of years ago at the time we went out to the cemetery and looking across from the cemetery into the dump, which for me was just completely eye-opening to watch the number of people who are just scavenging through the dump to find food or recyclables that they can sell or Christmas presents or food for their pigs or just the whole world that goes on in the dump and the smell and all of it.
Is that Guatemala City? Where is that?
Yeah, it's Guatemala City.
Yeah. So here, just a couple more shots, I think.
Yeah, those were all, in the first years. And we'd walk as a group sometimes to take pictures, But then, when Konica gave us those cameras, the kids could take the cameras home, and that was great because then we got really good candid shots, But from the very beginning, I was just amazed at the photos that the kids took. And, I did all this editing I was Reuters staff for Central America. So they'd send me to South America to edit when there were big things, and they'd send me all these different places. And these kids were good. I mean, they were as good as any adult. So I always presented them as photographers, not as, these are kids' photos, these are cute kid photos. So yeah, we've had shows in 14 countries, like the Tropen Museum in Amsterdam and the Seattle Art Museum, the Photographers Gallery, a couple of times in London at different places, Spain, Grand Cayman Islands, France, different places.
Hey, how long are kids on average in the program?
I'd say on an average, we start out with a class of maybe 15 or 20, right? And for the first year, we may lose about 3. The second year, we'll lose about 2. Then the next year, maybe we'll lose another 2. For example, we had the group that graduated just this year in Santiago. They'd been in it 8 years. There are 40 kids that started, 8 finished. But then,
Wow.
the ones that have gone on, it sort of amazes me because I guess, getting them young enough, you sort of plant a seed. And so ones that dropped out of high school, I found out later, went on to high school on their own. Boys that showed no interest in the university and quit during high school went on to the university. So there's, you sort of, they come from families where most of the moms don't know how to read and write. There's no books in the house. There's nothing, there's no role models really for that sort of a thing, except now there is, because we've been worked in some of these places like in Mezquital. And we went there, I don't know, I guess the last time you were here, Matt, and I remember talking to one of the moms, and she was saying to her daughter, well, you stay in that program, look at Abdias. He's working for Channel 3 as a cameraman. And look at Werner. He's, working at reservations at Avianca. And, you stay in that course, so it's kind of, you're planting a seed, you're getting, photography is all about seeing, right? And learning to see and learning to look. And once you kind of get that down, I think that stays with you. And then there's a curiosity and there's something else you bring to your seeing, right? So even if they stay in, usually I'd say maybe anywhere from 3 to 5 years, usually. And during that time, we give them an educational sponsorship. So we send them to school and they have to keep their grades up. And then we do our vocational training. So during that time, we get to know them pretty well, and the families, of course, and what's going on, and, you know, in the household, and if there's problems or abuse or lots of drinking and that kind of stuff. Not by them, but by their parents, you know. So we have a couple social workers and whatnot. Anyhow, sorry, go on.
No, Matt, are you okay with questions just continuing to come in, or do you want to go on?
Oh, no, the questions are great. Yeah, in some cases an hour, you know, with the families, see where they're living, get a sense of what the context is. The interesting thing for me is there was one day when it was a group of guys that were going in, and then Mary and Nancy, I think you guys were part of the same group, where it was just women that went in. And the guys ended up coming back because it's mostly, you know, it was the guys with mostly single moms and their kids. So we got back like an hour and a half before the women came back, and you guys all had like tears and the rest of it. I think you might have gone a little deeper than the guys did. This is sort of the corrugated metal, which was common of a lot of the places that we went into, right? The homes may or may not have had concrete on the floor. Some have dirt, but you know, it's pretty basic. Some have running water, some don't. It's a country that was really devastated by about 35 years of civil war, which really took its toll on the country. So, you know, incredible crime, which is, you know, driven by drugs and gangs, low literacy, particularly on one of the programs, which is largely the mine culture up at the lake. Very, very low literacy among that population. And we also talked about, you know, the poverty which is happening there. These are a couple shots, you know, on the way to some of the homes. This is one of the ones from a few years ago where this room here is one of the bedrooms that doubles as a living room. There may be a small kitchen, maybe with or without running water next to it. And this little girl back here was just holding on to her little puppy, which was just really touching and just a reminder that kids are kids. This is the mom and one of the daughters who we saw on this last trip. Like the words that came to mind when I just think about the family visits, the love and connection, and there's this great sense of humor combined with like grace and humility and just an appreciation, right? So, I think we were all at one house, and this woman who had very, very little was just going on and on about how blessed and how fortunate and how lucky she was. And
I mean, think about it. I mean, she's got a lot of, they have kids. And so one kid is actually getting a full-on scholarship. And one of the moms said to us, well, that means that's money I can spend on food for the family, So they've got it figured out. I mean, it's like, and plus it being the long-term, investment really, because the kids are all like, what I want to do when I grow up. Well, I want to get whatever it is, XYZ job, so that I can do something for my family. So I can help my family build a new house, so we can get furniture, so we can, so we can live. So my mom doesn't have to worry, or my dad takes the money to drink, but I'm going to be able to give it to my mom, and that sort of thing. So yeah, everybody's got a plan.
I mean, it really is the women who run most of it. But the one thing I do love about Fotokids is, you set it up, Nancy, in a way that the chores that I think traditionally would be split between boys and girls or men and women, right? The boys in Fotokids do the cleaning and the prep, and it's all very, very equal, right? When it comes
that was
to
my mom. She said she wasn't going to raise my brother like the kids, like the boys in Ireland, where they just sat around and let the women do everything for them. So she had my brother doing all that stuff. So I figured, yeah. So we had one time I had a mother's meeting in the city, and I said, oh yeah. And your boys are just so helpful around the house. They mop the floor, they do the dishes, and they were like scandalized, that I would make the boys do that sort of a thing. Yeah. Cause it's still very macho society here.
I can see we're making Steve nervous. Oh, so one of the things I like about this shot is this is obviously another one of the houses we went into, but on two of these shots, you'll see the photos that are up top, and like they'll have these wrapped in plastic and on a pedestal, and they're really these incredibly prized possessions that these families have. Here's another one. I think this woman, probably had, 4 other people sleeping in there. But the thing they do have is they do have a lot of neon Disney paraphernalia and blankets. So which in the midst of all this, you have like A lot of strong princess themes taking place.
Frozen. Yeah.
Yeah. This was an eye-opener from this last trip, right? So this woman, after we had our visit, she was anxious to get back out to her table where she makes those little tchotchkes and like key ring holders out of beads. And, it's essentially, this is the
Yeah.
chicken one.
I have one of those. They're cool. It's a big bead industry there, and there's several people that do export. So they hire them on too to produce and by piecework. So yeah, they're real into it. And in fact, one of the times, we do these well, kind of like when Margaret and Matt first came down, we'll have like designers and photographers and maybe writers and whoever else comes down, professionals from the States or Europe, and we do a week-long project, and we divide the kids into competing teams, and they have to interview the client and then come up with a design for the product, whatever it is. Maybe it's like, for example, like a label for a indigenous coffee farm for their coffee. And so then they have to present to the client, and they decide which one they actually want. So it's a whole week-long thing. And one of the moms was like, I don't know why you're involved in this project at all. You should be at home helping us bead like your sister does, so we can sell these things, So then, and she was like really upset, and she told it to Andres. And so then we started thinking, well, we can give these kids all 100 quetzales, which is like about $13, 100 quetzale bill for being in this. And that's like, I don't know. That's like at least 4 or 5 days of work for the mother, at least, if they've got that. Oh, then after that, it's like, are you going to that class? Everybody was like, we really solved that problem.
I like this one because there was actually a dad involved who was very engaged.
Yeah. And when the dads are involved, they're really good dads.
Yeah. So quick overview of the programs. So this is more than we can go through right now, but I did want to kind of go through just to give a sense. So these are ages, the 12 to the 18, of what happens at each year. So the thing when I actually went in and looked at the curriculum, it starts with everything from the history of photography to what a digital camera is, to the use of light. Then there's some really cool stuff where they'll see a photographer and they'll mimic that style, and they'll try to replicate it both in costume and setting and how they manage it with the camera. As it goes through, they get into various tools. So a lot of it is Photoshop and Lightroom and Illustrator. So in addition to photography, there's a strong graphic design component. So they leave the program with both understanding photo editing, video editing, as well as graphic design. And then the last 2 years get really important because they start looking at specific applications to work. So commercial photography, studio, advertising. So it's a very, very practical at the end. Start working on their portfolio. As Nancy mentioned, they start working with real clients. So they've got a customer or an internship that they're working on. So they're actually hands-on, learning how to interact with the client, how to do a light proposal. And they leave the program with a really nice portfolio of both photography and design treatment. The other thing which surprised me every time that we've gone is they're presenting to each other. These students at the end of the program are used to standing up and presenting their work from even a really, really young age. They'll show a picture they've taken, describe where they took it. So all that sort of social anxiety of presenting is addressed throughout the program. So a couple shots of the kids. So I go back and forth between the Guatemala City program. Most of the shots are inside for obvious reasons. The crime is much more in your face in Guatemala City. So there's a lot of security guards, protection, and it really is sort of a safe place for the kids to come and be kids and laugh and play and learn. You've seen the inside of these houses, and these kids show up looking better dressed than any of the kids that go to Tam High down the street from me. Clothes are pressed, they're clean. This is one of the things where I mentioned where they took a style of an artist, they dressed in that style. The photographer is trying to replicate that, but all in a really, really fun way. So I think this is probably the first year program that they come into with this.
Sí, lo que le decía a Manuel, que cuando estén analizando tu directora, escucha bastante,
Better than mine. Why did mine a little farther away? Excellent. Beautiful. Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the photographer that took pictures of Coco Chanel. So we have several kids that were dressed, with big white gloves and a veil, a hat, like Coco Chanel. and yeah, all different types. Yeah. Because one of the other assignments they do is to investigate. They have a list of famous people that they have to investigate, find out about their lives, and then take pictures as if they were them. So there's obvious ones like Frida Kahlo, and there's several by Vermeer, like the girl with the pearl earring and the milkmaid. But then there were some ones in there that I was surprised to see, like Copernicus. He was in there. Cervantes. It's like I wasn't sure who made up the list.
The shots here are from the ones outside are all from the Santiago Atitlan location, as are these. Here they're studying Cubism, trying to give them a sense of what the different styles are. A lot of really cool collaborative work that they do. And the other thing Nancy mentioned early on is all of these teachers came up through the program. So 100% of the people who were teaching here had been students at one point. So it's sort of, as you're in your second and third year, you start to take on more of a teaching role. And all of the administrative and senior staff are all people who came up through the program. This is part of the presentation. So even like the first year, they're presenting their work to the other groups. These are a bunch of kids who are gathered around a computer. And then this is Guatemala City, same type of thing in Atitlan. Here they're working on either Photoshop or Illustrator. A little bit older. Yeah, as you get older. This is some pretty sophisticated Illustrator work that they're doing on this last trip. Years ago, up in Atitlan, where they had a reception and a display of the photos for the parents. So this was really the first time that a lot of the parents came and saw their kids' work or saw their kids presenting something. And they never would have imagined, particularly here where very few of these parents actually speak Spanish. They all speak a local language called Tsutsuhil. So for them, it's just this unimaginable thing that their kids would be presenting their work in a place like this. And they got free tamales. So this was the graduation. So this was a couple of weeks ago up at Atitlan. And they had the big Instagram type picture frame. So this is the graduation with the parents and the kids. As if this program isn't challenging enough, you throw COVID on top of it. So the kids couldn't come into the program. They were locked in the house. We were sort of struggling with what to do. And, there's nothing in person. The kids don't have cell phones. So what happened was somebody thought about taking one of the board members, Logan, took the SD cards, basically took the classes, recorded them on the SD cards, sent them out to the kids. They watched the classes on the SD cards, did the classes and turned them back in. So, it was one where like, do we just pause the program? What do we do? And it all came up where they would record the teacher and send it out and send it back. So I thought that was kind of a cool approach to solving a problem there. I do want to be sensitive to time because we've been going for a while, but let me bomb through a couple profiles of the graduates. So this is Evelyn, who Nancy started working with in the dump when she was 5. And, she has been sort of a rock star throughout. And she's now the executive director of the program. So she basically took over from, and you remember her, Margaret, I'm sure. She basically took over from Nancy. So she's the local executive director. And at the opening of the retrospective, Nancy spoke, and then Evelyn got up to speak, who I had seen, she participates in the board meetings. but I never heard her present to a large group in Spanish. And it's like, this woman could become like the next president of Guatemala. She was like on fire. So it was really, really cool to see that. So yeah, she's passionate. She's running the program really, really well. Andres, who you may also remember, this is him at 9 when he did the self-portrait of himself wanting, to be a teacher. And he's now running the program in Santiago Atitlan. Rumor was he may run for mayor. One of the other graduates is running for mayor as the first indigenous woman in Santiago Atitlan to run for mayor. So, and he's also just one of the world's nicest guys. This is Berlin. When he was 17 here, he started at 12. He's now married to Evelyn, and he is like number 2 at Fotokids in the city, and is also just one of the nicest guys in the world. Linda, another one of the students who I think she was there when you were there, Margaret. These are not Guatemalan kids. She actually had an assignment in Africa, but she has traveled around the world and is just an absolute top photographer. She's also working at Fotokids. And then here are a couple of kids who came in from the dump. She's now working for the Ministry of Communications. This is the one that Nancy mentioned before, Abdias. I may be pronouncing that wrong, but he's now working as a cameraman and a photographer, and is flying around in helicopters, and his work is showing up in the New York Times. There's another one who's another guy I didn't put him in because you can only have so many pilots. But Werner, who was there when you were there, Margaret, he's got his private pilot's license and he's getting his commercial pilot's license. Anyways, I could go on. I have a lot of these. Oh, this is David. This is the kid who I sponsored for years. So he's now doing video editing for Fox Sports in Latin America. So Nancy talked on a lot of this. So for me, there are like 3 pillars on why I get really excited about Fotokids. One is, it gets the kids off the street, it gets them fed, keeps them away from gangs. So sort of safety is number 1. The second one is skill development. And, there are the hard skills, the computer skills and the design skills. And it's not just the photography and illustration, but it's like being digitally savvy, as well as the soft skills, right? The presentations, client management, collaboration. And then finally, I think this comes partly from the photography side of things, is that whole development of a growth mindset and development of confidence. When you give a kid a camera, it gives them a sense of purpose and confidence to go and interact with the world in a way that they never would before. There's something there that has been really interesting for me to watch over the years. And then for the impact, we've talked about there are 2,000 students that have gone through the program. We've got 150 currently enrolled. I can't see that. I think there are 6 who are currently at university. We built one new building at Santiago Atitlan, so it's a new school. So we raised money 2 years ago and got it up and running online last year. 100% of the teachers are Fotokids graduates. And one of the things that's really cool with that is when these kids come in and talk about what's going on at home, their teachers can relate 100% to what they're going through. So it's not some sort of intellectual connection. When we took the kids to Berlin's dad's house, who's still living in a corrugated shack, right? They're like, so they have that connection with the teachers. So next year, we're on track to bring in 70 new students. So you may ask yourself, how can I be part of this goodness? There are 2 scholarships that Fotokids offers their kids. One is one for the Fotokids program, which is the teachers and the photography program. But each kid that is in that also has to be going to school. And as you might imagine, the education system in Guatemala is really, really poor. So the private schools in Guatemala run about $600 a year. So for the students who go through, they get a scholarship for the Fotokids program is $600 and the primary school or secondary school for $600. And then in those cases where they go to university, the university in Guatemala runs at about $3,000. And there's also one more that Nancy, I think she must have dropped off, or she's got a bit of a flaky. Oh, you're back.
Yeah, it did drop off. Yeah, it just clicked
Okay.
off. Yeah.
So I know that you were excited about the chicken opportunity too, Nancy.
Yeah, it was started years ago when friends of mine visited from New York, and we bought smoked chickens for the families for the Christmas Eve dinner. Because the great thing about the smoked chicken is it doesn't have to be refrigerated, and nobody has a refrigerator, so you can just leave it. It's cool enough that it doesn't decay, right? And then when you cook it with rice and vegetables, that smoky flavor goes through everything. And so it seems like you're getting a lot more than you're getting. And so everybody uses it now for their Christmas Eve dinner, which is the big meal. And I mean, when we first started out, it was like 60 kids. Now it's 150 kids, and of course the chicken prices have risen. So now it's like $1,300 just to do chickens for 150 kids. It's not bad for 150, but still.
So yeah, so this year we've got 70 students at $1,200 each. So we're sort of I teed this up right before Giving Tuesday, and I've sort of gone out to Facebook and friends and just wanted to put this out there to see if anybody might be interested or had friends or knew people who might be. So this is the other example of what you get when you sponsor a student. So Nancy, I think I told you when I went to pick up from Walt, he had a box full of these from like all the kids he sponsored over the years. And it's, those of you who have talked to me after I've come back know that it is like one of the things that just gets me the most fired up, every year and every time. And there have been years in the past where I'm like, I'm busy. I don't know if I can make it down. But every time I do, it is just so good for the soul to see these kids and how hard, Nancy and the rest of the crew are working.
It's like it works, and I think it works because it is the long-term investment. It is that you stick with one kid and you find out what turns them on. Maybe it's not photography, maybe they like the graphic design, maybe they like writing, maybe you just any other creative outlet. Video, we teach video, I mean, just anything that sort of like turns them on. And then even kids that are mediocre all the way through, really, as long as they learn one thing that's really important. They learn to stick with it. They learn tenacity, because they stay in the program. So if you've got that down, you've really got it kind of down, because, I mean, how many people do you know that get jobs just because they stuck with it, not because they're brilliant,
All right. Well, it's so good to see everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good to
Bye.
see you, Mary. Okay.
Great to see you, Nancy. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.